This episode contains mature themes and discussions that may not be suitable for all audiences. We believe in open and honest conversations, which sometimes means exploring topics that can be sensitive or challenging. Listener discretion is advised. My name is Shantell Martin, and I'm the host of What's the Point? This is a conversation series dedicated to exploring why artists create art and the forces that influence us. Join me as I sit down with artists and friends to talk about their reasons for doing what they do and why they continue to create. I'm very happy to introduce today's guest, Samantha McCurdy. Love Samantha's work. Samantha is a Philadelphia-born, Los Angeles-based artist who primarily uses stretchable spandex as a morphable canvas. I don't know if that makes sense for me just saying it, but go see her work and you'll understand what that means. And it's incredible, it's beautiful. It's so strong and powerful and subtle at the same time. So I'm really excited to learn more about that and how she got there. But her paintings are an invitation to imagine what could be possibly reaching out towards the audience. She's exhibited several times at Gallery Urbain. Please welcome Samantha McCurdy. So welcome, Samantha.
Thank you.
How do I say your name?
I usually go by Sam McCurdy.
Sam McCurdy, okay.
Yeah.
I thought that, but then on Instagram it said Samantha.
Samantha, sometimes in professional settings I'll use Samantha because it seems more grown up, but I feel like Sam McCurdy kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit more. And also my friends and family call me Sam.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. And I heard that this is your first podcast.
This is my first podcast, yeah.
Okay, how's it feeling so far?
You know, on the drive over here, I was very nervous. I'm like, what am I going to say? But we didn't have any prompts or anything, so I just landed on just be yourself. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. Do you feel like you need some prompts in life when you do new activities?
I mean, it's always nice to have preparation. It's always nice to have field questions prior to, but I don't know.
Yeah. That would just mean that I would then have to make questions prior to it. And I think I prefer being a little bit more spontaneous. So that's interesting feedback, though. I might consider that. So this is a podcast series where I want to talk to artists and essentially find out why they make art. I don't think being an artist in today's society is the easiest thing to do. And so there must be something that is driving us all to do this thing that can be challenging, that can be hard. At times, it might seem that we don't get the support that we need, or, I think there's lots of hurdles to being an artist. And so I hope for myself and others that these conversations will shed some light on why we choose this bizarre career path. And with that, I'd love to ask you, what was your first introduction or experience with art?
I definitely think it's one of the hardest career paths, just because of the way that we put stake in it financially or thinking about it as like a real or viable way to make a living. I know that majority of the people think it's like crazy or not like contributing to society in a major way that like propels us forward and everything like that. But I guess my first experience with art was just at a young age. Obviously, I've been doing art my whole life. And then when it came time to go to college and get ready to like take the next step in my education, I didn't get into any schools for academic reasons, but I got into every single art school that I applied to. And so that was like an indication right there of like, okay, like this is obviously something that I'm good at and that other people in academia think that I might have a future in based on my, acceptance and scholarship opportunities. So I said, we're going to do it. We're just going to do it. We're going to go for it. And then it wasn't really until undergrad or my first, academic experience outside of high school that I thought, okay, like this is something that I'm going to do forever.
So unpack that a little bit. So you applied for schools in academic subjects?
I mean, yeah, I went through like the ringer of like, okay, we're going to apply to this school. We're going to apply to this school. I don't really know what I want to do yet.
Yeah.
And then sort of like randomly, I also applied to art school. I don't know how much of like my personal life, at least in adolescence, to attach to this, but I got in trouble quite a bit as a youth with the law and otherwise. And so I guess a way to keep me out of trouble, my mom signed me up for weekend art classes. So I didn't have time to hang out with the wrong crowds and get into sticky situations. She was like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm sick of like, picking you up from the police station or otherwise. So I'm going to sign you up for art classes. We're going to try to like imbue some other things into your life that might be like worthwhile or give you some sort of like spiritual guidance, because I didn't really do well in school, especially academically. I just like was really angry and had a lot of like behavioral issues and just like was not pleased at all. I don't think that the public school that I went to was really good at, I don't know, like pedestaling me or like bigging me up in the ways that I needed to be. It wasn't very like helpful. And so, yeah, I was like just a really like angry kid. And then when I would express myself artistically, I found a lot of peace there, and I found a lot of like resolutions and calmness and ways that I could kind of like zone out and turn my brain off almost in like a meditative way that I hadn't experienced before. And so from taking those weekend or like Saturday school programs that my mom signed me up for, I accidentally was building this portfolio. And that was something that I used to, then apply to colleges. And to my surprise, I got scholarship money and acceptance.
Wow.
And was like, okay, damn, like this is maybe something I should do for real. And then, I graduated high school with like, I want to say like a 2.3, like dismal. Like
I have no idea what that is.
It is bad. It means I missed like 45 days my senior year, almost didn't graduate. I just like I did not score well in any way. And so I never had like a good relationship with education or with school. But then when I went to art school, my first year, I made the dean's list every single semester. And
what does that mean to make the dean's list?
I guess the dean's list is just like you're scoring higher than majority of your class. You're like passing above average for every class. You're getting straight A's. You're just excelling. And so that was my first experience with success in an academic way, where I was like, oh my God, I've never gotten like straight A's before in my life. This is like an obvious indication that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I just wasn't, challenged in a way that catered to me or the way that my brain thinks. So, I did really well in college. And I remember even coming back my first semester, my mom was like, what the fuck? Like, what is happening? I'm like, Mom, I don't know. I love going to class. I love all my classes. I love all of the assignments. They're so cool. It's like a new way to express myself and a new way of thinking that I was like never tested at before.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it shows you it wasn't that you were a troubled kid or a kid that would get in trouble. Is just that you weren't being stimulated or supported in the way that you needed to as a child to keep your attention or your focus or your kind of energy, And I think sometimes we just say that kids are bad or missed, we just put them in a pile without actually considering what we're not giving them.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I don't want to say like the dumb classes, but I was in like the dumbest classes with lower grade levels in a lot of my classes in high school. Just like you were saying, I just wasn't supported in the way.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting a bunch of friends first semester at undergrad art school, and them all having graduated from like an arts magnet school and like all of these specialized artistic schools that I hadn't even heard of. I'm like, what is an arts magnet school? What is that? And they're like, oh, like it's a special high school for creative kids, for artists. And I was like, damn, like I really wish I would have went to a school like that. But I don't think that my parents had the means to send me to anything other than public school, but also neither of my parents, like my mom was a school teacher, my dad was a cop. So like I don't think that they knew that that was even an option. And of course, I don't blame them at all. Everything happens the way that it happens, and I wouldn't take anything back. But yeah, just meeting kids that had that like prior knowledge, I was like, oh, okay, damn, like there are other options for kids.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, that idea of access and resources, so when I was in school, like high school, or we would say secondary school, because of where I came from, they automatically put me and my friends that came from the estate that I came from, here you would say projects, in the bottom class. They didn't even test us. We're in the bottom class based on where we came from, and we've already been labeled problem children without even having a chance. And for myself, I moved up every year until I was in the top class. But it would have been nice if from the beginning we were actually treated as children and not judged on based like our social class and where we were from. So I can experience, like I have that experience of what it's like to be treated like that. And then my siblings, they didn't move up. They stayed in the bottom classes where they were put from the beginning. And I would see how they were entertained, not educated. Because if they weren't, they assume that they wouldn't get the grades that the school needs to get the money. So therefore, they don't really count. So they entertain them versus educate them.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's like, hey, just like sit in this chair and be quiet. Like, don't make like a big fuss. Like, our goal is to just get to the end of the bell ringing.
Yeah.
And that's that.
But that's amazing for your mum to have that initiative to put you into art school, that the weekends.
Yeah, I mean, she saved my life in so many ways. Like, I definitely accredit my creative journey, even in adulthood, to her. She was the one that sparked that interest from the gate. And my mom also, she taught special needs for 40 years. She started as a teacher, and then she became a curriculum planner. So she would meet with individual students that had special needs or developmental issues, and she would build lesson plans for them. And so I think she saw some of those things in me with behavioral things and was like, okay, like, how can we engage her? How can we get her to feel something and just exercise her mind in a way that's going to make her feel good or successful or experience, success.
Yeah. And when you think back to that time when you were going to the art school at the weekend, do you remember any specific projects or artwork that you made at that time?
Okay. First of all, so my mom, again, not an artist, signs me up for, it was Saturday school at the University of Arts in Philly. I grew up in Philadelphia. And so it was at University of the Arts, a college, and I was 14. And I was like, okay, cool. I took the train in. She signed me up for figure drawing. I didn't know what that was. She didn't know what that was. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to draw portraits or people or whatever. And I'm 14 in this class. I set up my easel. I set up my sketchbook. And this man walks in a robe. And I'm kind of like, okay, like cool outfit, whatever. This man like drops his robe fully nude. My face turned bright red and I'm having like an internal meltdown. And I'm also like one of the youngest people in the class. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I've never seen like a grown man penis before. This is crazy. I was like shaking and just like, it helped me because in that moment I was like, it's just shapes. It's just shapes. Just look at this man like shapes. Like I'm not in a position to sexualize this person. Like it's not about sexuality. It's like, I just have to make my drawing look like real life. It's just shapes and it's just lines. And then at the end of the class, I like rush out of there, take the train home to my mom's. And my mom was so excited. She was so sweet. And she was so excited to like, see, let me see what you did. Like, I want to see your drawings. I just like gripped my notepad under my armpit and just ran up the stairs. I was like, no, it's bad. Like, I'm not showing you. It's not good. Da-da-da. Ran up to my room just because I was like, I cannot show my mom these naked drawings of this like grown old man. Like, I can't even deal with this. And I don't think I told her until like much later.
So you think that those drawings must have been pretty good then?
I still have them. They're like at my mom's. We joke about it now. Now that I'm older, obviously I can have conversations with her, but it's a joke in my family where my mom afterwards would try to put like parental like lines on certain things I would want to do. And I always kind of throw that example in her face, like, Mom, you sent me on a train to draw a naked man when I was 14 years old. And now you want to put your foot down in certain ways? I don't think so, babe.
Yeah.
You know?
So you're from Philadelphia, which is an interesting place because, very close to New York. When you were younger, would you go back and forth to New York, or were you pretty much, in Philadelphia?
I definitely went to New York quite a few times for field trips. Obviously, when you're in proximity in grade school to certain like major places, you'll definitely go and visit. I wouldn't say that I went really with my family too often. Philadelphia has like one of the best art museums, in my opinion, in the world. Like the PMA, Philadelphia Museum of Art, has one of the largest Brancusi collections, Cy Twombly collections, and Duchamp. It has the last piece of artwork Duchamp ever made before he passed away, called Anton Donné's, which is like a sculptural interactive piece. But yeah, I wouldn't say that I went to New York too much. I pretty much stayed in Philly and was like, doing little Philadelphia things.
I think when I went to Philly, I was surprised about the amount of museums that are there that you don't hear about. Because if you're in New York, you only hear about the big, museums that are in New York. But then you go to Philly and it almost felt like on every other corner there was a museum.
Yeah, they have the Rodin Museum, which is like a giant collection of Rodin sculptures. They have the Barnes collection. They even have like smaller collections of like, there's a lot of famous Pennsylvania artists like Andrew Wyeth. There's a beautiful Andrew Wyeth family museum called the Brandywine River Museum. That's a 3-story building. And so Andrew Wyeth is the most famous of the Wyeths, but his father, N.C. Wyeth, was a really famous illustrator. He illustrated Treasure Island and all of these children's storybooks that, became some of the first examples of like illustration at that level. And so the first floor is N.C. Wyeth, his dad, all of his hand-painted illustrations. The middle floor is Andrew. And then the top 2 floors are his son, Jamie Wyeth. Wow. And Jamie Wyeth was really good friends with Warhol and painted a lot of people, in the Velvet Underground and in Warhol's warehouse community. And so there's a lot of like queer representation also. And then Andrew Wyeth's sister and wife also were artists. And so they rotate the collections out, but to have like a top to bottom museum just of this like iconic Pennsylvania family is really special.
That sounds really amazing. And it also sounds like you have an interest in art history and, you're good at remembering names.
Listen, I have my favorites, and the Wyeths are like for sure one of my favorites. I don't know like everything about art history, but I definitely remember the people that have touched me. Yeah. And I think maybe I have an affinity to artwork in Philadelphia or artists that came out of there because I came out of there also, and I'm looking maybe for like a connection or like, I didn't expect this to like happen to me or for me to be a professional artist or anything like that coming from where I came from. And so maybe I'm just looking to these kind of artists for inspiration of, you can do it.
Yeah. And that's interesting because you are coming from the same place as them. You're coming from that same town. And in a way, there's going to be a lot of similarities to the inspirations, perhaps at a different time. But from a geographical standpoint, probably some of the same things that you're seeing and experiencing.
For sure. Andrew Wyeth paintings, I can look at they're so loose. Like some of his watercolor landscapes are so loose, but I can tell it's Pennsylvania. Yeah. Like the colors of the grass, the colors of the trees, the sky at certain times of the year, like is very Pennsylvania and like nostalgic to me and familiar. So geographically I can point out stuff.
I love that. And then so you, from Philly and you went to school in Baltimore?
Yeah.
So tell us about that. What were you studying? What did it feel like to get into Baltimore, to move to a completely different city?
Okay, Baltimore is such a trip. It is truly a lawless city. It has no rules. It was when I was going to college there, that was a time before Uber. It was a time before Instagram. it was a truly magical space. Like, I went to the same coffee shop next to my art college that John Waters went to. I would see John Waters like every single day, who's like a Baltimore and queer icon. He would also do like all of these little like project films with kids from the art school that never saw the light of day. But like, we would go to John Waters' house or his studio. And it was like, it was such a special time. It was also the first time I had been surrounded by that many artists, because again, like none of my friends were artists in high school, none of my friends that I grew up with, none of the people I went to high school with. And so it was like a really kind of beautiful, immersive experience where I was with like a lot of weirdos, a lot of people that were raised differently and came from other places. And also like, because I grew up in Philadelphia and was familiar with city life, meeting friends that were from like Arkansas or Texas, walking around the streets of Baltimore at night with no sort of like street sensibility of like protect yourself and be wary. So I felt like sort of like the hard friend, sort of like, hey, like I know we're going to a costume party, but maybe throw like a trench coat over our outfits because we do have to walk like 6 blocks to this party through this part of town and it's nighttime. And so, being around just a lot of different like brilliant people who excelled in certain ways and then also were naive in certain ways, where I was like the opposite, right? I'm naive very much in art and art making, but had life experiences on how to get around in a city environment. So, I mean, that was like really cool.
I love that. I'm smiling because it reminds me of when I first went to art school. So in 1999, I went to Camberwell College of Arts. First time I'm kind of leaving my ecosystem, my part of London. And, you're surrounded by a bunch of weirdos, as you said, like people with different color hair, holes in their clothes, listening to different music, different income brackets. And I was just so surprised, like the first couple of weeks, that people didn't get beaten up, because it's like, how can you look like that and no one's hitting you? You're saying you're gay and no one's beating you up. Like, for me, it was just the first time going to art school where I experienced that people could be different. And then that was celebrated. But I do remember the first few months of school, everyone was getting robbed because they would go to the pub and they would leave their bag on the back of their chair or, just little things like that. Whereas if you've grown up in London, you'd say, what are you doing? But we had all these kids from the countryside and from Asia that had no idea of how to operate in a big city. And so I did love that juxtaposition of being friends with people that came from a complete different world to me. People that have slept outside with cows or something like that. Because I grew up in a concrete jungle. So I think that is the amazing thing about art school is the people that don't fit in, the people who are the outsiders, the people who think a little bit different. That's where we find each other.
Yeah, that was my first experience, like meeting people of like such a like myriad of walks of life, trans people, gay people, people that were in thruples or like, had 2 dads. And like, I had experienced that obviously living in a metropolitan area, but not that I was like that close with and so many. And then also even like, I was also surprised, like people were getting robbed a lot in art school, like because they'd be carrying giant notepads and like their giant like tackle boxes full of paints and like, at nighttime after class. And it's like, okay, like you're a target. And that kind of thing doesn't leave you as quickly as you think. Like so I moved to LA almost 7 years ago, and I had grown up like on the East Coast. My real experience with the beach was the Jersey Shore. My family went down to the shore like every summer, and it was like a pretty shitty beach. And then when I moved to LA, the first time I ever went to the beach with some art friends of mine, we have our blankets set up and everything, and everyone's like, let's go swimming, let's go in the water. And I'm like, okay, well, who's gonna stay back and watch our shit? Like, who's gonna watch our bags? And they like laughed at me and they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't particularly want to go swimming in the ocean and watch us get robbed from the water. You know what I mean? And we're not going to be able to swim back in time. And everyone like laughed at me and was just like, it's fine. It's California. Like that doesn't happen here. And I'm like, all right, well, like, I'll stay back then because I'm not going to risk it. Like, you have to have somebody like watching your shit. In my experience of the beach, I've gotten robbed so many times on the beach on the East Coast.
Yeah. And that's if it's not tied down, someone will take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And so you said you moved to LA 7 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. But going back to Baltimore, first time, bunch of weirdos, you're in the art system of an education system. Like, what are you making? What are they telling you to do? What are your projects like?
Oh my God, it was so weird. A lot of words got thrown around like existentialism. And I was like, what? I don't even know what that is. And a lot of kids who went to arts magnet schools were like, you've never heard of like existential thought and existentialism? I'm like, no. And then, we had classes like race theory, inquiry to like critical art.
And when was this?
I went to art school in 2008 to 2012. So yeah, it was a lot of foundation year was trying out different things, right? Interdisciplinary sculpture. We had painting. We had, I never took graphic design, but we had like mixed media courses. And then, we had courses like queer theory, intellectual history, and race theory. Just, I got thrown into it with a bunch of concepts that I had personal experiences or thoughts about, but never thought that it was like, could be expanded upon in an academic way. And I think a lot of that was me realizing like, okay, like you're not dumb. You can understand concepts. You just don't have the vernacular or the language to speak about it eloquently or in a way that seems like you're educated or you know how to talk about these things. But once you read it and talk about it in class, like you have the ability to understand like the conceptual idea of what we're talking about, which was like, a really, really amazing breakthrough realization for me as a person.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because schooling in a way is such a, I'm not sure what the right word is, but it gives people permission to be able to talk about certain things in a certain way. The language that we are given at a certain level of education are almost like keys or gates that allow us to unlock these different concepts or kind of subjects. And a lot of us are not given those keys. And therefore we have doors and we have to kind of articulate them in our own ways. And I've always believed that if I don't know how to spell it, I won't use it. And that's a lot of things because I really can't spell to save my life because I had a crap education. But I think working with limitation also makes you incredibly creative. And one thing that you learn along the way is that you can be highly, highly educated, but you don't really grasp or understand real concepts. And we all learn in different ways. And I think a lot of us are passive learners, especially if we're creative. We're learning from what's around us and what we see and the things that we touch and the things that we make. And that's just a different way of learning. And I think sometimes there is this judgment on how you've been educated and how you speak about things, but there isn't necessarily one's more correct than the other. I think it's about you being able to articulate your own views using the tools that you have access to. And sometimes those tools aren't verbal, they're physical.
For sure. And you might not have like the vernacular or the, put on a plate for you. How do I describe this? But you're not blind and you're still a person that walks the earth and has eyes and like sees things. So I think for me, it was like at first it was a lot of like, this is like that, like making my own strange like connections between things. So these experiences or these scenarios might be different, but conceptually they're the same idea. So I feel like, it was a lot of this is like that, and this is like that, and this is like that. And these things are all in a similar thread, but are functioning, they function the same way, but they are just like coming out as different scenarios.
Yeah, and through that power of observation.
Yeah.
And so I want to get to you moving to LA, but before I do that, let's backtrack a little bit. And can you describe what your work looks like and what your work is?
Yes, I sure can. Yeah, it's funny to describe my work with words. I always find it like easier, obviously, to describe it with words when you have a visual aid. But just to describe it in words, I would say I'm a shape maker. So I love shapes. I make shapes. My pieces are square or rectangular frames with shapes built into them, and then stretchy fabric, spandex, or like a lycra canvas stretched over top like a skin. And then the surface is painted with acrylic paint, house paint, architectural paint.
And you call some of them snug sculptures?
Yeah, I call them snugs. So a lot of times I'll make two shapes that they're sculptural, but they hang on the wall. And they kind of like, I hang them close to one another, and the shapes sort of fit in almost like a puzzle piece. And so I just, I think they like snug up against one another. And sometimes I make the joke, if I'm going to make a piece of artwork that's forever, I want it to have a partner, somebody to snuggle with while it's like hanging on the wall. You know what I mean? Just like a little cuddler.
I love that. And, when I look at your work, it just makes my brain feel good. I think there's something that's so smooth and satisfying about it. But at the same time, it's really not obvious what it is or how it's created. It just looks very bold and minimal, but at the same time, it's very soft and subtle. So it has that real nice juxtaposition of like materiality and physical. Like it's not harsh, but it takes up space. But then the shapes within itself are very strong, but at the same time, they're not, and I think there's a lot of things at play when I see your work that I really enjoy.
That means a lot to me. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, they're kind of like, at first it didn't start off that they were based on the body, but a lot of them kind of take on forms similar to a body, right? So like, if we think about the wooden frames as the skeleton, the shapes inside as like a rib cage or something, and then the spandex stretched over top as skin, they're still structural, but they are still soft. And because it's like, a stretchy fabric with a latex paint painted over top, when you touch them, you can kind of like press your fingertips into the surface, and it pushes in and then bounces back because it has a lot of like elastic and flex in it. So they are extremely lightweight also, and yeah, really soft. But of course, like I meet a lot of people on the internet who have never seen my work in person and oftentimes think that they're cast out of plaster or plexiglass or carved out of wood or something like that. So to my understanding, sometimes visually they look like heavy or like they have like a weight, and then when I do studio visits with people, I think the biggest surprise to those people is how soft they are and like kind of malleable.
I did think that they were carved out of wood. Yeah. So if describe that process again. If it's not wood that they're carved out of, like what is that underlining skeleton?
The underlining skeleton is wood. So I'm a woodworker. So I'll build a frame like a rectangle or a square, just like you would for a regular canvas. Regular canvas, you have a wooden frame and then you stretch canvas and staple it around the perimeter. So I'm doing the same thing, except canvas, I'm using a spandex-like material and stapling that around the perimeter. But where it differentiates is I will build shapes out of wood that become like the guts.
Yeah.
So I'll build a wooden frame, and then whatever shape I want to make, I will also make that, cut that, carve that out of wood, attach it, screw it, glue it, nail it, clip it to the frame. And then once the skeleton, like the guts, are secure, sanded down, everything, then I'll stretch like the skin or the spandex over top and paint it.
So the interior of the wood is hollow.
Yeah. Yeah, and where the wood isn't, like if I'm doing a circle, just a wooden circle that's stretched in the center of the frame, the perimeter, like the margin from the circle to the frame, is all very like soft. The part that slopes down is really like just squishy kind of.
And when did you start doing the snug sculptures?
Okay, in October, I had my 10-year anniversary show. I've been making this work for 10 years. And it happened right after undergrad. After undergrad, I moved to Dallas, Texas for no reason.
Wow.
I didn't know a single person there, but my roommate at the time was dating somebody who lived in Texas. It was sort of like a sugar daddy situation. I didn't have plans after undergrad, so I was like, fuck it. I'll just move to Texas with you. I looked at some real estate and some apartments, and it is way cheaper than LA and New York, where all my other friends are moving to. Looks like I can get a big ass space, pay next to nothing. All I want to do is make art. And until I got in that space, it was always me making art with a lesson plan or a project or a prompt from my teachers. So this was the first time where I was like, okay, Sam, we're in your studio. It's just you. There's no assignments. Like, what do we want to make? What are we making? And I started making the pieces of artwork, the style of artwork, the snugs that I'm making now in that first year that I moved to Texas. And it was, I don't know if you want to know what inspired me to make that, but it's also goes back to my mom. So when I was in undergrad, I was a painting major originally. I was doing oil painting, and Philly is really close to Baltimore, and dorm rooms are small. So I would store all my paintings per semester at my mom's house. And I love her so much, but she does not know how to store paintings. And so, you know, she would be bragging about me to my aunts or like her friends, like, look at these paintings Samantha has here. And she would take them out of the very neatly stacked pile that I put to keep them safe. And she would pull them out and she would lean them against the corners of tables or chairs.
Yeah.
And the corners of the tables or chairs would sort of poke these nipples like through the face of the canvas, essentially ruining them. And I would come back and was like, oh my God, what the fuck? Like, there's all these nipples poked through my canvases. Like, how could you think that this was fine? Like, this is basically rendering it ruined. I don't know, like, all these paintings are ruined. I could try to re-stretch them, wet the back, like, do whatever. But, like, I'm not going to do that. And so now I just have all these, like, nippled out paintings. And so I was thinking, when I first moved to Texas, I was thinking a lot about intention and, like, okay, artists, for me making artwork, it's all about intention. And it's only wrong if I didn't intend for it to be it this way. Like, of course, there's room for happy accidents. But for me at the time, I was like really interested in like what renders a painting ruined. And that would be for me like not intending for it to be that way. So then I was like, okay, let's remedy this like, you know, bad taste in my mouth situation with my mom, and let's turn it positive. So I'm going to intentionally start poking nipples into my artwork, right? So I would do these paintings, and then, you know, in the back, I would screw dowel rods just like poking through the back. So in the front, it would create the same sort of effect that my mom accidentally did. And once I started doing that, it became less about what was painted on the surface. And that's when my like minimal journey like started forming, where I was like, okay, it's not about what's painted on the surface. It's more about the gesture of the poking through or the protrusion. So I'm gonna have them be blank. I'm just gonna paint them one solid color so that I can just focus on the gesture that's happening.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. And it's almost like you reverse engineered you know, kind of this happy accident in a way.
It's funny because like I've told that story a few times, and my mom is like, I wish you wouldn't tell people that. It was an accident. And I'm like, Mom, I love you so much. Like, I would not be making the work I am today, literally without you doing that. Like, I'm sorry that that's like hard for you to hear, but I'm so grateful that you did that.
Yeah,
you know?
it's positive.
Yeah.
My mum threw everything away in the trash. I came back and it was all gone, and she was like, I needed the closet space. So I was like, okay, you know.
Oh my God.
But it's okay. I think I have some pictures of all of that work, and it was just very dark and like lots of skulls and very red and black, and, you know, lots of negative words written on it. So in a way, I think it's good that that stuff's been thrown away?
I would love to see it. I'll be honest. I would love to see it because it's such a like moment in your life, being like an angsty young person dealing with emotions and hormones for the first time, and how that kind of comes out in your understanding mentally at the time, you know?
But I do think about that a lot because I was an angry kid as well. And I could get it out because I had art. Like I would just go and write something. Like I just write, tons and tons of pages of just stuff, or you just go draw something. But then on some sense you would feel better because you had art as a therapy or as an outlet or as a tool to deal with it. And I always think about, well, what if I didn't have that? Like, where would I have gone? What would I have done? What would I have resulted to kind of get that stuff out in a different way? And I think that's the thing why art is so powerful, because it is that tool that allows us to recalibrate ourselves and be balanced with ourselves and extract emotions inside ourselves that perhaps we can't get out in any other way.
Yeah, because it's so real. Those feelings are so real and they can paralyze you sometimes. And language exists, sure, but I think the function of language most of the time is socializing or communicating at a regular level, if we can use the word regular. But art is almost like your language of expressing those emotions, right?
And you can be as dark or as morbid as you like as an angry teenage art student. I used to make little nooses, and my business card was a hangman with my name and number on it, and then it came with a little noose, and I would make them for people. And I never thought anything was wrong with it at all. I just thought this is really cool. I learned how to make these. I'm studying memento mori. I vibe with this. I'm understanding this, and it was more of a keen interest in these objects or tools that are used to represent death. But being a child that was kind of trying to understand life and death and all of those things, art's such a beautiful way to explore that.
Yeah, I feel like I can recognize a lot of more dramatic, more on the nose or obvious representations when I first started making art.
Yeah.
I also was making skulls and kind of dark, but also really sexual stuff, really horny stuff. And my current work there's certain pieces that definitely have sexual or horny undertones, but it's more subliminal, less on the nose, more minimal. And I look back at some of my first pieces in that way where I'm like, okay, maybe not as many boners or titties. People will still understand the sensuality of these pieces without it being so dramatically explicit. You know what I mean?
Because you get to find yourself, and then you get to understand your language and the way that you can express yourself without using these on the nose kind of icons or symbols. You get to kind of extract from that. So that's really fun. And you said you moved to LA 7 years ago. What sparked the move? Because, everyone moved everywhere else. You went to Dallas, Texas, and then you came to LA.
Yeah. I love Dallas. I still love Dallas. I still go back at least once a year. I had a really, really fun ragtag couple years there. I had a huge studio space. Again, my friends that were struggling in New York or LA to show art, it was very much at the time catch-22, you can't get a show unless you've already had a show. Mm-hmm. And so I had this big ass space. I was like, fuck it. Send me your art. I'll just start throwing group shows. We'll have art shows here. It was super amazing. A lot of my friends would come down. We'd have group shows. And I started booking musical entities to coincide with whatever curatorial show we had going. And the fire department started shutting us down. And so, every Saturday it was the same two dudes. I guess I was on their route. They would come, they would bust us. They kept being you need an entertainment license. You can't do this. And I'm like, fuck it, I'll get one. And then I find out an entertainment license is $25,000. And I'm like, okay, I can't do that. And then I got I was kind of oh, you're going to shut down an art show, big bad fire department. Oh, you hate art. I'm contributing to the creative community here. I can't believe you're going to shut us down. But literally it was my 15th warning. Yeah. And that time they were Samantha, we we literally have to arrest you the next time we come here. Like, we cannot keep giving you warnings. We have to fine you. Like, you have to get the fuck out of here. Like, you have to stop doing this. And it was right around the time that I also got representation at a Texas gallery. And so with those two things combined, I was like, all right, I've outworn my welcome here. I can't think of any other space like as unique and incredible and beautiful as mine in Dallas. So like, what's next? Let's shake it up. Let's move somewhere. I've never lived on the West Coast before. I've moved and lived up and down the East Coast. Let's live in the West Coast. Let's see like what that has to offer me. Maybe I'm a sunny girl, and I have representation now in Texas, so I still have a presence here. I still come here once a year for solo shows with the gallery. I still have like a ton of friends here. I can go back whenever I want. I have to let go of this place. Yeah. And so, yeah, I moved to LA and just lived on my friend's couch for a couple months until I found a space that's very similar to the space that I had in Dallas.
Wow. And so that was 7 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
It is incredible. It just shows you if artists have the space and the opportunity, we will build really incredible things. And it also shows you the limitation sometimes to big cities in being able to do that. Or even in Dallas, you need a very expensive entertainment license to do that. And that does stifle creativity and community and art and collaboration because you don't have a very expensive piece of administration.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was so magical, but I think also aside from that, like I wouldn't have been able to get away with that, I don't think, in any other city. So it was a really magical time. But, aside from that, I felt like the ceiling was also visible pretty quickly in Dallas because it was a blessing right after undergrad to go to a city that wasn't as saturated with the arts as New York or LA, because it helped me build a community. And it also helped me meet artists like bigger and badder than me, because whenever they would come to Dallas for a show, there wasn't really like a lot to do. There would be like one bar or like one event. And so I got to like meet a lot of artists and rub shoulders with artists that I looked up to. And so, once I sort of realized that the city spends a lot of money on like importing artists and importing talent and not as much on the local talent, it kind of made me want to also like explore outside. And I felt like it was really great for what it was, but I was ready to challenge myself in a way where, not saying that like in a competitive way, but I felt more confidence as an artist to move to a city that had more saturation and just try my luck, Yeah.
So are you a sunny girl?
I'm a sunny girl. I love it. I do not miss the winters on the East Coast at all. I don't miss shoveling my car out of a parking spot and then fighting with somebody who parks in it when I get home from work. Like, I also love the pace here. Not to say that people in LA don't work hard, because they work very hard. Obviously, I'm looking at one of them, but I think like 100% in LA is almost like a New York 60% as far as working goes. And I like the pace here. You have the opportunity to check in with the chaos if you want to, and then you also have the opportunity to kind of isolate and take some time on your own. Whereas New York, I feel like it's not always an option. You walk out your house that day or that morning and you really can't control what comes in and out of your peripheral and, what sort of like jarring sounds and motions and people you come into contact with. And I wanted something like a little bit more peaceful.
Yeah. And so as a whole, how has LA been treating you?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it here.
And so I haven't been to your studio yet. It's on my list.
You got to come.
And I think, are you in West Adams?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your studio like?
So my studio is stunning. It's beautiful. It's incredible. I built it with my own bare hands. It's a big open floor plan, wood ceiling, open exposed, like truss and bow, like beams in the ceiling, windows all around, a nice, beautiful parking spot in the back, which is coveted. But yeah, I mean, when I found that space, it was just a big empty box. It's the whole top floor of a building. Beneath me is a liquor store / bodega, which again reminds me of the East Coast. And the bodega's been around since the 60s, so it's also cool. The owner, same owner. He's like kind of my dad on the block, which I love. But the space was just, a big empty box. When I first moved in there, I was by myself. All of the perimeter walls are concrete. And so I had in mind to turn it into an art gallery, just like my space in Dallas. I wanted to make art there. I wanted to live there, and I wanted to show art there. So my first thing was, okay, I need to put drywall on all the perimeter walls because it's all concrete. It's a real bitch to hang artwork with a masonry bit. Every time you want to hang something, God forbid it's not level, you got to take the screw out and do it all over again. So there were also no bedrooms. It was just an empty square. And the way that I could afford it was like, okay, if I build bedrooms in this space, I can get 2 or 3 other artists to split the rent with me. We can all live here, and they can also have studio space. And with our powers combined financially, with us combining our studio and our living rent, it's going to be so affordable and way cheaper than if I got an apartment. You know, you really can't get an apartment for like under $1,500, even if it's like a little studio. And then you need a studio, which the cheapest ones I've seen for a shoebox is like $500 to like $1,000, and then way up from there, obviously. So rent was super cheap all over for this space. So I just like got to work. It took me 3 months to build it out. I literally just had like a suitcase, my chop saw, my power drill, and then a mattress. Like I didn't even have a bed. And I just put tarp around my personal effects in the middle of the space. I dropped a couple $1,000s on plywood and drywall. And I just like, and 2x4s. And I like recorded it on my MacBook too. And by myself with the help here or there from friends of mine dropping by, I just built, like framed out the walls on the floor, screwed them all together, stood them up. Because of the open ceiling, I just clamped it to the ceiling. And then once that like frame was set in place, I put drywall over it, screwed that all in. And then I put, or plywood, then I did drywall, taped, muddied up the seams, rented an industrial sander from Home Depot. My hair looked like George Washington, like literally powdered wig. And the whole place was just like covered in drywall dust. And, you know, that's how I had my like little Dextered out, like tarped up sort of moment in the center. And then once I built the bedrooms, I just started reaching out to my artist community and was like, okay, who needs a work-live space? I just built one. The rent is super cheap. And I found 2 artists almost immediately to split the space with me. And so from that moment to now, I've had like many artists come and go in that space. A lot of my friends that moved from Texas or from New York or elsewhere wanted to like move to LA. My house has been kind of like a landing spot for a lot of my artist friends, for them to get on their feet, find out what neighborhood they want to like actually live in and get a studio in. And then some of them have stayed for years. So it's kind of been like a little rotating like artist haven.
Wow, I love that. So the space itself is a piece of art.
Yeah.
You know, you built it. It's a sculpture, but people get to live in it.
And you'll see when you come over to like some of the construction is a little shoddy because like I have tons of construction worker friends from Philadelphia that like build houses, and I would be FaceTiming them like, how do I do da-da-da-da? How am I going to get this drywall around this circle duct work? Like the duct comes right through the wall, and they're like kind of coaching me through like how to do certain things. So some of the like proud things, one of them being like me drywalling around the circular like metal duct. I'm like, look how beautiful that seam looks, you know?
No, I love that. Now I'm even more excited to come and visit. Now I know the history of it. And I love that even just as a concept, you know, to create an open space and to build live workspaces within that, and then create these ecosystems or landing pads for artists who perhaps would struggle finding somewhere else, you know? That's really incredible.
I love it. It's been so beautiful for me too, because, you know, some of the artists that have moved in temporarily have like put me on to a lot of professional practice that I've adopted. And I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. It's like one of the things I miss the most about undergrad or art school is critique or community, right? And now that we're out of school, I have to kind of chase that on my own. I have to make like connections on my own and like get people to come over. And so living with artists, you know, with more or less experience than me, we're all kind of like teaching each other. And so, yeah, some of the artists have taught me things. And then some of the younger artists that have moved in fresh out of art school, I'm able to like help them, like show them how to stretch a canvas or how to ship their work, how to communicate with galleries and not get fucked over. Like, I'm happy to like share any knowledge I have. Let me help you draft that email. Like, this person sounds shady. Fuck that. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It puts me in a position of like a student and as an educator, which has been like a really well-rounded sort of setup.
And it is interesting that because, you know, the further you're out of a institution, the less access you have to peers and mentors and, you know, people who are going to critique your work, etc. So that within itself is like a really cool ecosystem.
I need it because like a lot of the times when I make art, it's solo. I'm by myself. I'm not showing anyone. Again, it's not for an assignment. I'm not getting graded on it. Like, and sometimes weeks go by and I look at this piece of artwork and I'm like, am I crazy? I didn't talk to anyone. Nobody knows I'm making this. Nobody knows this exists yet. Like, I need to engage more in my community before I show this or whatever, just to like see if I'm super off base or what the response is, because like making artwork in a vacuum like that is interesting. Like it's awesome, but it's also, it can make you feel, at least it makes me feel self-conscious or like I'm a little crazy or, you know, I need to just tap in with another human being about what's going on here.
Is there a big scary project that you'd love to build or make or create that perhaps you don't have access to do by yourself?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I think like the biggest scary project that I would be my dream project would be architecture. Because I make shapes that are, you know, big like circles and, you know, protrusions and bulges and different shapes. I think like if I could take one of my pieces and make a building look like that, that would be like one of my dreams. And when you're saying like, you know, that I might not have access to, it's something like that that's structural. I would need to work with like engineers and architects and people at that level. So I feel like, yeah, like I would love to have like an apartment building for artists or something, or like an art space where the exterior looks like one of my sculptures.
No, I love that. And I have also wanted to do architecture for a long time. You know, I'm creating lines, they're 2D, but what if those lines had an actual form? And I think that's why I've always liked Zaha Hadid's work, because she painted, she created furniture, which is architecture for the body, and then actual buildings. And I think, you know, she was a really great example of, you know, you take your identity or your fingerprint as an artist, having a strong style, and you can take it to any medium. You know, it can be a 2D painting, it can be a chair, it can be a museum, it can be a building. And there's something like really fun about that idea.
I love that level. I love that, like, started with painting and then furniture and then architecture, buildings, because it almost like supersedes, like from audience or patron experience, like the following supersedes it, where it's like, okay, you experience this through your eyes or your senses, right? The next one, you're experiencing it through physical touch and like, you know, supporting you, like a piece of furniture. And then the next one, it's like a dwelling or like an all-encompassing piece of artwork that you are now existing in, where top to bottom, all of your senses are being stimulated.
A few weeks ago, I went to these artist lofts in Venice. I don't know if you've ever been to them, but they're called the artist lofts. And you know, I went to visit a friend there and I was like, oh my God, like I need to design like a little artist commune where, you know, everyone has really great light and big windows and open space and, you know, good storage. And we're all kind of connected in a way with these communal courtyards. And we should have that. You know, it's just when it gets to real estate and development and, you know, those are projects that cost multi-millions of dollars and permits and zoning and is kind of out of our reach. But I think if we put these things out there in the world, there is that want or that need to live in these smaller ecosystems and communities where we get to support each other. And we do have those elements that support health, like light and space. And, those things could be and should be built into architecture, but we're not seeing it. So if you have all these architects out there in the world building these new residential buildings, but they're not putting the elements in there that are actually encouraging healthy living and communities, I think there's a responsibility that they're not really living up to, that they've been able to get away with.
Yeah, I mean, it's all capitalism to me.
Yeah.
Everything chalks up to capitalism. It's like, how can we put humans in the smallest possible space for cheap as possible, where we're making the most amount of money, we're covering our bottom line, our margins are fat as hell, and like the person suffers the most. You know what I mean? Like the person who's inhabiting those spaces suffers the most for somebody else's benefit like that.
Yeah. So where are you storing your work? Is it you have it at home as well, in the studio? Yeah.
Yeah, I have. So when I built the space, I built 3 bedrooms for myself and 2 other artists. And then the 4th one I built sort of by the kitchen is the storage area where I keep like, incidentals, cleaning products, like backstock, light bulbs, this and that, paint. And then I also store my artwork back there. So all of my backstock, things that I would have in like a studio sale one day, maybe something that like it has a small imperfection that I would never show like in one of my shows, but is still like something I want to hold on to. It's also where I store like my paintings. But currently I don't have too much backstock. I got a few pieces back from my last show that I'm showing right now. And then a lot of times like I am made to order type of artist, which I know is like maybe rare or different. A lot of artists like just make like a body of work, but I feel like for me, because my artwork is 3-dimensional and takes up like a significant amount of space in someone's life, I oftentimes work directly with clients on like size and shape and make custom pieces mostly. So most of the time when I'm working on pieces in the studio, it's already spoken for.
Yeah. And how does that process with commissions work? Do people reach out directly to you?
Yeah, it depends financially, like where I'm at. But I have, at this point, I've been making this work for so long that I have catalogs, right? And I kind of break my catalogs into the type of client where I'm like, okay, I have like my minimal girly who likes black, white creams. And then I have my like wild girly who likes the like orange, the reds, the hot pinks. And then I have like sort of my more edgy girly, right? And so I have like, these catalogs that I will send off to interior designers or curators. And the message is something to the effect of like, hey, please keep me in your orbit if you have any upcoming projects I might be a good fit for. So it's me reaching out in that way. But then it's also a lot of people like DM me. I would say like almost majority of my sales comes from Instagram.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who like necessarily like promotes or anything like that. I'm just posting my art. And I think like I just have a hardy enough client book, I guess, where a lot of times what will happen is like a really cool girl will buy my artwork and have it in her house and have a dinner party or something. And then her really cool friends in her group will also want a piece.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like all these little micro communities of people that start to collect my artwork. And then with their powers combined, I'm able to support myself.
I love that. Are you documenting the work as you make it?
Oh my God, I'm getting way better at that. But there are so many pieces in the world that I did not take one single picture of. Sometimes because I create and box my work myself mostly just because the shape is so unique. And I've had 10 out of 10 experiences when I box my own stuff. And this has happened so many times, as soon as I put that last piece of packing tape on, I'm like, you did not even take one single picture of this. What the hell? And so I bought a camera. I'm taking pictures. I started recording a little bit of my process, even though I am kind of shy in that area still. But documentation has been like my weakest part of my process. I'm trying to get better at for sure.
Have you considered using an inventory system where you can basically take a picture of a work and then upload it to an inventory system and assign it like a stock number or a reference number, and if it sells, you can put the new owner's information in there and keep track of everything, kind of like a living catalog. Have you considered that?
I have never considered that because I've never thought about that, but it's something I will consider. That's such a good idea.
Yeah, because I think, it's something where you could just be like, I'm not going to do this or be concerned with this going backwards, but right now going forward, I'm going to make sure everything's in an inventory system. So from now onwards, you have a reference of, you can search stuff, you can find it, you have documentation there, any other information, location. And then that way in the future, when you have a museum show, you can select this work, this work, this work, this work, and everyone that has that work, and it's easier then to reach out to them or present those works, etc.
Obsessed with you. This is what I'm talking about. I love this because, wait, is this what you do too? Do
Yes,
you do this?
yes.
You do?
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a good idea, especially geographically. If I have a show in a certain city, it's like, duh. You just type in this certain city, and then I would imagine the inventory comes up per location, and then I can just invite locally whoever is there.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, as far as cataloging and going back to art history, I'm always thinking about that, like, damn, all these artists like signed and dated all of their things and had like an archive, like an inventory. And like, if I die, good luck. Like everyone's not going to have no idea when anything was made. Like, sure, I sign and date my pieces, but I don't have them on my person. They're out in the world. So unless those people came forward and put like on loan from such and such collection, like they're gone forever. That's such a good idea, and it's something I need to start doing for sure.
It's interesting because a few years ago, I was like, okay, I'm really going to take this seriously and document all of my work and do condition reports and measure them and take professional pictures and upload it. And it took about 2 years to document everything I had. And during that process, I'd find a drawing, and I don't really have a practice of signing or, kind of dating my work. So there'll be a drawing and I'm like, I have no idea when I made this. Maybe it was 2012. Maybe it was 2002. I don't know. And then it's interesting because you'll go to a museum show and you'll see a curator speak about a work, and that's not dated or signed, but they'll be like very confidently, this was made in 1853. And you're like, I don't even know if it was made in 2003 or, 2013. And so I think there definitely is a lot of stuff that's just, made up, I think. And then that's why I think it's our responsibility in a way as artists. And not all artists care, but, I'm one of those ones that care about artists having their voice in their work. So it's not someone else up there making up the dates and the titles and what it meant. It's the artists themselves, in whatever means that they could, telling the audience in the future and distant futures what it meant and when it was made and perhaps why they made it. And, because of that, I started a YouTube series a few years ago called Provenance, where I just went into my studio archive and I pulled something out and I spoke about the provenance of the work and why I made it and where it was and etc. And so I'm a huge advocate for these kind of living provenance or exposures of the work and why you made it and, when you made it and where you made it. So it comes from you and your voice.
I love that. I imagine like all of these artists rising from the dead and coming to like curatorial exhibitions and like, that's not what it meant. That's not what it meant to me. I had no sort of semblance of that concept. Because you're right, like when people do curate shows, especially if it's like they're including multiple different artists' work, it's like this such and such artist made this piece around the same time as this artist making this piece, and you can sort of see between the two the correlation between what it was like living in France. You're just like, is it like, was that, or is it a stretch, and is it just something that you can like, I don't know, it's so easy to bullshit conceptually about any art, any piece of object.
And then it just comes down like, does it matter? Like when you're gone, do you really care what people are saying about your work and in relation to who or where or what moment or what time and, what connection they're putting on it? Personally, I care about it now. So I feel like I might care about it then, but, I think that's the big question in a way.
I love that. I'm excited to get organized in that way. And I mean, I do have images at this point,
Yeah.
so I can still go back and do the dating and everything like that. But I also like the aspect of like writing a small description of like where I was at the time and like what my thought process was, because that's the thing that would be hardest to conjure up post, right?
Yeah. So one thing I'm going to start doing this year is with my studio assistant, we're going to sit down once a quarter and almost do kind of like not an oral history, but like a form of a studio interview where we talk about the work that's present in that space at that time, to have some form of like growing, living audio archive of me in a particular space. So, you know, whatever is in that vicinity perhaps will get mentioned. And then over time, that becomes almost like diaristic. But, you know, it's not every day. It's going to be every quarter.
I love that. I love that so much. And then per quarter, all the artwork that you made will fall under that one video of where your head was at the time.
Yeah. And also this year, you know, it's taken me a very long time, but I'm going to have my first intern. Yeah, it's like even that word is very foreign to me. It's like, you know, you've seen people having interns all the time, but I've just always thought it's an odd concept. But, you know, with an intern, it'll be interesting to see what that experience is like, to have someone in the studio that can help, but perhaps doesn't have a lot of experience, but perhaps has ideas and some skills. And so I'll be curious to see how that works out.
Yeah. And what do you look for in an intern? It could be...
For me, you know, I'm in the studio, I'm mostly obsessed with organizing and documenting. So I'm looking for someone that has attention to detail, that's good with spreadsheets, that has an interest in artwork, perhaps an interest in art history, preservation, that type of thing, documentation, but also might have some ideas of how to showcase the work. You know, I'm on social media, but I don't really use it at the same time. So maybe, you know, this intern being a bit younger and out of school might have a little bit more interest in doing those types of things around the studio.
Yeah, I love the youths. I love the youths because I feel like they have like a fresh or new perspective, especially the youths that just came out of art school. I'm like, tell me what the kids are talking about. Tell me what's going on. Like, as far as like, presentation, do we hate pedestals now? Do we hate that? Like, what is like in the zeitgeist of like your age bracket? But yeah, I mean, of course, somebody that's like organized.
Yeah, of course.
For sure.
Of course. So work-wise, what's coming up for you in the future?
So currently, I don't have any shows for this upcoming year, for 2024. And currently I am working with, I have a few commissions in the works right now, just client to client, for residences, which is pretty much like the usual. But the thing that's on my horizon that is kind of out of my territory that I'm excited about is I'm working on a lighting fixture.
Oh, nice.
Like a lighting collection. I did one big lighting fixture in 2022 with an interior designer out of San Francisco. His name's Michael Halal. He did the Kips Bay Decorator Show House, which it happens in multi-cities. This one was in Dallas, where they take over an entire like giant house and they give each designer their own room to sort of create a story and dictate. And he approached me about turning one of my pieces into a lighting fixture. He's like, I just want a lighting fixture to be one of your shapes. And so I did the same process, but see-through. I was very much a prototype because the guts, I'm not certain were not exactly not flammable. And so I made it very clear, like, this is a prototype. Like, this is not, I can't be certain this won't light someone's house on fire. So this is like just for show. And so fast forwarding to now, he does a furniture collection that's being sold with a company out of Antwerp called St. Vincent's. And his furniture collection is modular, incredible, very much like in a similar vein as my artwork. And so right now I'm on prototype number 2
nice.
Of our lighting collection that hopefully will come out sometime next year. And I've done a plexiglass prototype that turned out very handmade looking, a little too handmade looking. And so now I'm going back to the drawing board and I'm going to do my third prototype of what it could look like. And with something that feels that permanent, like, okay, this is going to go into production. I just really want to take my time with it and make sure that I'm absolutely loving the composition and the shapes created in the prototype so that I don't have something become produced at a higher level and there's like, oh, I really hate that semicircle or I hate that. Like it'll drive me kind of insane. And so I want to make sure I sort of arrive at something that feels really nice and natural while also good enough to be produced at a higher level that I don't, get anxiety about.
Yeah. So. No, that's super exciting. I love lighting, so I can't wait to see that. That's pretty amazing. And also, I want to see a furniture line, and then those big buildings. Yeah. And then so just to finish up, what do you think is the point of art?
Oh, I was worried you were going to ask me this. So I think like maybe if I can extrapolate from a small part of our conversation is like, for me, the point of art is creating your own language. It is a way for us to describe feelings and emotions in a new alphabet other than what we've been given, right? Language exists for communication. It's the standard. And I think we're just like creating an alternative way to communicate with people that's communication through other things than verbal. It's the senses, it's feelings, it's touch, it's emotions, it's sensations. And with my artwork, I'm trying to create shapes that elicit feelings and emotions from people that I feel and can't always articulate.
I love that. Thank you so much, Sam. Yeah. And where can we find you? Where can we see more of your work?
Oh my goodness. You can find me on the internet. My Instagram is I am Sam McCurdy. And my website is samanthamaccurdy.com.
Okay, go check it out. Thank you so much, Sam. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What's the Point? Recorded at Spotify Studios in Los Angeles. Check out our website made by Eat.studio. Grant Alexander Peters does our theme music, engineering, and editing. Research and pre-show preparation are done by Vern Molidor and Joyce Adams-So from the Shantell Martin studio team. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a nice 5-star review. Don't forget to check out the show description for more information on today's guest. And you can follow myself and the podcast on Instagram at Shantell_Martin. What's the point?
Non-constructive, non-specific, non-disclaimer, non-believer, non-materialistic, non-crossover, now crossover, deductive, assured, running, assured, running, belord, running, encounter, running, encounter, running, destructive, constructive, specific, material, realistic, believer, involved in the construction of the deduction of the construction of the deduction of the construction of the deduction of the construction of the deduction. Crossing over, overthinking, oversinking, overblinking, overdrinking, overeating, overcollecting, overseeing, overspeaking, overloader, over and over, believer, judicial, involved in the steamed of the collector, non-collector, non-conductive, non-constructive, non-discriminative. Crossing over. Crossing over. Thinking about how being non-specific, thinking about how to be non-destructive, thinking about how to be constructive, thinking about how to be deceived, thinking about how to be you, thinking about how to be me, thinking about how to be assured, thinking about how to encounter, thinking about how to materialistic life insist. Encounter, deductive, encounter, assured, encounter, crossing over, encounter, this is over, encounter, we are over, encounter, moving over, encounter, running over, encounter, walking over, encounter, reading over, encounter, thinking over, believer, material, realistic, space, reliever, material, realistic, space, revolver, material, realistic, space, revolver, assured in the space, realistic, crossing over, crossing over, crossing over, non-specific, non-constructive,